this nation awoke to a scene that provoked almost unparalleled disbelief, anger, and great sadness. In an act of senseless cultural vandalism, Britain's most iconic and loved tree was cut down. The 300-year-old sycamore on Hadrian's Wall, a UNESCO World Heritage Site, was down. It was all over national media. The hairy biker, Cy King, explained it as murdering a sentinel of time and an elemental spirit of Northumberland. Ian, the photographer, said that he felt his heart was ripped out, that they had destroyed a part of the northeast. Words such as appalled, saddened, part of our collective soul echoed the headlines. UNESCO recognises the intangible cultural heritage of mankind in the same terms that it does the pyramids or our dear sycamore. A piece of the humanity of mankind was lost as the tree crashed to earth. Quite incredible, the emotion that a non-native, invasive, biodiversity-poor species, considered by some to be a weed, evoked. As someone who belongs to the persecuted and misunderstood community of natural conservation hunting, allow me to put that into context and explain how we feel. What natural hunting, as a central part of our way of life, means to us, how much we value it, and how much it matters to us. I think it's useful at this point to define the word science as I understand it. Science is the pursuit and application of knowledge and understanding of the natural and social world following a systematic methodology based on evidence. And also where anthropology fits in. Anthropology is both the most scientific of the humanities and the most humanistic of the sciences, wrote Eric Wolf in 1964. Anthropology uses the tools of the natural sciences and the tools of the humanities in order to understand all aspects of human life. Natural conservation hunting and hunting culture sit squarely within that science. Natural hunting is embedded in complex and multifaceted social and cultural worlds, which need to be understood as just that, complex social and cultural worlds. These worlds should not be dismissed as anachronistic or simply traditional. They are current, lived worlds full of deep significance to those who belong to them. It is important to emphasise also the word belong, rather than simply participate in them, because belonging is all-encompassing, a community of belonging. Anthropological studies of hunting are not simply studies of practices, but more fully of the communities related to those practices. If there is one message I want you to understand from what I say today, it is that natural hunting is not a separate entity that lies outside the fabric of society. And we might wish that the fabric of society was a simpler thing, but it is not. It is an extraordinarily complex organism, and within its boundaries, within its jaws, and within its digestive system, we have to find our way through. We, the minority, who now stand for the oldest try at life that human beings ever practiced, and that for 99% of our existence as humans in this form the most formidable practice to ensure the survival of our species, the breeding of our children, the development of generations, the establishment of cultures. Cultures, ladies and gentlemen, that ought to mean as much as species. Human cultures that ought to mean every bit as much as species. The language of our international agreements and our international institutions ought to be talking about the loss of human culture in the same kind of way that we talk about the loss of biodiversity, because it is the form of biodiversity. And the cultural traditions of Lancashire and Cheshire, of Norfolk and Cornwall, of Britain and Ireland, Germany and France, Saudi Arabia, Colombia, Peru, New Zealand, or Central Asia, wherever they may be, of the indigenous people of the world. These are sacred elements that came out of our relationship with nature, and therefore we ought to be concerned about the loss of culture. And this is the space in which the hunting community not only ought to, but has a blatant, clear, manifest directive to play a part. It is your culture. Defend it. And there is much more to that culture than simply the death of an animal, as significant as that may be. I come from Northumberland, and my family and my family's families have lived here alongside the Scottish border for over 500 years, as far as we know. We're still there. My ancestors are scattered in graveyards from one end of the North Country to the other: North Yorkshire, Durham, Northumberland, Cheshire and Lancashire. We are the people of this place, and we have been a part of this land, working it, shaping it, conserving it, living it, loving it, being it, and knowing it for a very long time. And we are the people of the land, the animal people. We called ourselves Cumbri in the old Cumbric language, and the Romans referred to us as Combrogi, which meant fellow countrymen. We called ourselves simply the people, continuing today by a whisker as Cymru in Welsh or Cumbrian. We have no intention of giving over, and we will fight to defend our culture. Politics is a blood sport, as the great Nye Bevan MP, regarded as one of the most influential left-wing politicians in British history, said. Dennis Skinner, MP for 49 years, a champion of the miners, having worked down the pit for 20 years, remarked that banning hunting had nothing to do with animal welfare, it was revenge for the miners. My great mining and natural hunting friends from the Northumberland coalfields, who produce the most superb hunting lurchers and long dogs, who love their whippets and race their greyhounds, find Labour's anti-hunting policy deeply troubling. During the miners' strike in 1984, they kept their communities and families fed with deer, hares and rabbits. There was no money coming in. No surprise that their bond with their hunting dogs is so strong. They lost their livelihoods and survived by hunting. Sir Tony Blair invoked the Parliament Act, having spent 700 hours of parliamentary time and money debating hunting, whilst at the same time spending 7 hours to decide to commit to war in Iraq. In an act of providing some red meat to his backbenchers, he banned hunting in March 2005 and subsequently declared this to be his biggest political regret in office. So revenge for the miners, Mr. Skinner, actually meant that having taken their livelihoods, the Labour government then crushed the soul of a significant portion of its electorate. Unforgivable. Let us hope that we are more mature now and start to behave like a proper parliamentary democracy that is meant to celebrate diversity, support minorities, and govern in a spirit of tolerance and freedom. For those values, I spent 12 years serving Her Majesty the Queen and the government as a soldier. We are neither happy nor proud of this state of affairs, and we feel that our support and votes have been taken for granted. As Peter Mandelson said in June, rural votes are up for grabs, and there are 200 seats to be won. A government-changing figure, I'm sure you'll all agree. To my esteemed political friends, not far from where we stand today, you have backed the wrong horse for years in your desperation for likes and shares and tweets. Embarrassing and pathetic. You have lost our trust and have now got a rural reaction from the quiet people of Britain. To find ourselves in our greatest love, natural hunting, criminalised by bad law with no science is ridiculous. Virtue signalling nonsense with no knowledge, no understanding, no evidence, no sale. The ballot box will have the final say. We have collectively ignored the real threat to our communities, our sense of belonging, our beloved wildlife and its habitat for far too long. What are you prepared to actually do, to play your part in this Game of Thrones. It is not in the gift of these people who either govern us, oppose us, or try to represent us to destroy our cultural heritage and our way of life. Natural hunting is the embodiment of the cultural heritage of mankind, and we will never betray that God-given trust in us. Let me remind you, in case that disgrace had been brushed under the carpet, that where I love to hunt, as my grandfather, my aunts, my cousins, my children, and my greatest friends hunt, across the wild open spaces and hills of the borderlands of England and Scotland, that earlier this year, hunting with dogs was banned, along with trail hunting. And on Tuesday, that law will be enacted north of the border. The end result, ladies and gentlemen, is that at least 500 years of cultural significance that included music, art, literature and poetry, stock breeding, wildlife management, upland shepherding, rural community cohesion, and the talents to ride across steep country with hounds and survive tough conditions and tough terrain in the company of great friends was essentially destroyed. And with it, our wildlife. Now that the fox is regarded as vermin, as opposed to a much admired and noble quarry, it has lost its value, and it is slaughtered wholesale using every method available to kill it as efficiently as possible, including the use of thermal imaging night sights on highly sophisticated rifles. The fox is not naturally adapted to cope with this devastating threat. It thinks darkness is its cover. There are worrying indications of local fox extinctions in certain localities, with no close season to enable its population to mate, breed, and raise its young undisturbed, as we always used to do. Whilst the Finchley fox population explodes with its dustbin food bank. Hares, no longer managed sustainably by hunters with running dogs, are shot in huge hare drives, thousands at a stroke in a day. Deer are now being eradicated, unsustainably shot 365 days of the year, 24/7 in Scotland, to protect carbon offsetting tree saplings to meet net zero. No seasons anymore, no respect, just total eradication. Madness. That's not conservation through sustainable use, that is an atrocity. UK wildlife law is outdated and not fit for purpose. It needs urgent review based on scientific research, not anthropomorphic emotion from TV celebrities, footballers, cooks and musicians. And politicians today need to own that responsibility and be held accountable for their actions. This is the trajectory of change that we are all involved with, and every one of us needs to figure out what was our responsibility in this. Because no matter how precious something is to you, no matter how much you care, no matter how deeply it is embedded within your culture, this thing we call society can determine to take away everything you have. And if you think that you are immune and that it'll all just go away if you keep your head down and fail to act, you are kidding yourselves, and you are responsible. You have no more resilience than my family and our dear friends on the Scottish borders. Until now. Thank you.